Initiating moisture.
Break out the popcorn and get ready to change your diaper. It's moist meter time, and we're looking at House of the Dragon. This follows the remarkable disappointment of Game of Thrones Season 8, the most disastrous season ever broadcast of any show ever created. It single handedly killed the cultural relevancy of Game of Thrones, which for about 7 years was the most popular show ever broadcast. And now no one talks about it, no one remembers it fondly because of how awful Season 8 was. And this show couldn't have been worse than season 8 under any circumstances. If all of the episodes of House of the Dragon were just Two Girls, One Cup on loop for an hour, it would still be better than season 8 of Game of Thrones. So this whole franchise had nowhere to go but up, and I'm happy to say House of the Dragon is actually good. I expected it to just kind of be a throwaway, maybe a bit messy, convoluted, and even follow in similar footsteps of maybe Game of Thrones Season 7, which already showed signs of bad writing. I thought House of the Dragon would just go whole hog bad writing right off rip, but it didn't. I actually enjoyed it far more than I expected to. I don't think it's perfect by any means. I have quite a few complaints that I'll of course highlight in this review, but overall I was pleasantly surprised. I did enjoy pretty much every episode here. There's ups and downs, of course, but on the whole, I actually thought they did a really decent job with this. So let me go ahead and talk about the things I like. Of course, with a show this high profile and this high budget, you're expecting great visuals, and you get them, obviously. Apart from a couple of moments on Dragonback where I was like, damn, I can't see anything but CGI here. It looks a little goofy. But that only happens like twice throughout the entire show, with like a couple of silly scenes that kind of stood out. But overall, the visuals are absolutely amazing. And I actually think they look better than Rings of Power, which was $1 billion show. I think the visuals in House of the Dragon were actually at times better than Rings of Power. So take that for what you will. I just really thought they did a great job world building in a world we're already somewhat familiar with. It's in the universe that we all know if you've watched Game of Thrones or read the books, but it still felt like unfamiliar. I didn't know exactly how things would play out. These are characters I don't know, but it's bloodlines that I'm familiar with. So for me, this didn't fall flat like some other prequels do, where you know where things ultimately end up, so the journey there is kind of meaningless since you already know the conclusion. Here, I don't know where it's going or where it's going to stop or where it's leading, because it takes place so far before Game of Thrones that I'm just in uncharted waters here. It's exploring a very interesting past, and I think they've done a great job with setting all of that up and getting all of the pieces in place. Now, it is pretty slow paced. I think most people know that. The show is a bit of a slow burn at times. There's not a ton of, full throttle action with, skulls flying all over the place, people's eyes being popped out of their socket, ripping guts out of buttholes or anything crazy like that. There are, of course, those moments. They're used sparingly throughout the season. But when they're there, I think they hit pretty hard, and I think they really elevate the tension and the stakes of the show. So I really appreciate pretty much every direction they went here, except for one. They put so many time jumps in here, it's crazy. I think there's 4 or 5 time jumps. So you'll have a time jump of like 10 years, 4 years, a couple years. I mean, it could be a time jump of a week. Like, it's just constantly shifting throughout time. So one episode, you'll have Rhaenyra and Alicent, and they're young, they're like 15. And then the next episode, they're like fucking mid-30s. Alicent's got 2 kids, and Rhaenyra's pregnant, and everyone's pregnant all the time. Every single episode of this show has someone pregnant, or a new pregnancy being announced, or a new baby on the way. Between the time jumps and pregnancies, my god, like we entered into some kind of alternate dimension where every time a woman even looks at a man, she's immediately pregnant. It is crazy how often people are pregnant here. But back to the time jump, it creates a problem where it's hard to like really get to know a character, because in one episode you feel like you have a pretty decent handle on where they are in the show, like their personality and like their mentality and the decisions they might make. But then the next episode, there's a huge gap of years. So this is like now a completely different person in a different place in their life. So you have to like relearn about them. You can't follow them through like this natural progression of like, aging, learning, and growing. So now everything you knew about this character in the last episode doesn't really apply anymore because so much time has passed. So it makes it just a little bit difficult when some big decisions get made. It feels like it almost comes out of left field sometimes, and it's just because so much time has passed. So you don't understand how they'd arrive at these big decisions and these big conclusions. And another thing that stood out to me is the only people that age up during these time jumps are Rhaenyra and Alicent and King Viserys. King Viserys just keeps aging until he looks like a goddamn reborn zombie, like a fucking mummy straight out of Emotep's coffin, or sarcophagus. Like, he's the only other one that ages up. Everyone else stays exactly the same age, despite years going by. So everyone around Rhaenyra and Alicent look the same, but it's still 10 years into the future, and you have to, like, wrap your head around that. So, like, Sir Criston, for example, he looks exactly the same at the end of the show as he did at the beginning, even though like 15 fucking years has passed or something. And to kind of go back to the pregnancy thing, this also creates a problem because there's so many characters you have to keep track of and remember who's who, like whose kid is who. It's like an absolute daycare. There's kids all over the place, so there's so many characters that you need to remember the name of and where they're at in the universe. And there's two characters that have the exact same name, and they're both important characters. There's two Aegons. There's an Aegon on Alicent's side, and there's an Aegon on Rhaenyra's side. You know, like, it's just so many fucking characters to keep track of because they're always just popping babies out left and right. There's more babies in this show than the entirety of Rugrats. So, there's just so many characters to constantly keep track of, and the time jumps were a bit frustrating. But those are, like, my only two main complaints, I would say. Everything else I did enjoy. Again, it is a slower paced show. Don't go in there expecting like a ton of action or anything like that. It really is a lot of strategy, like them plotting moves in order to further their goal or in order to stick to a certain plan or tradition. And I just think it's pretty well crafted. One character that I'd like to highlight is the King Viserys. I actually found that character really interesting. And I don't know if this is a spoiler, it might be a minor spoiler, but the first few episodes kind of made it seem like this guy's, he's bad news. This guy, he's done some fucked up shit, and how could you ever forgive him? But by the end of the show, every time he's on screen, he's just being wholesome. Like a warm person who just kind of wants to please everyone, but in trying to please everyone, this pursuit of making everyone around him happy or peaceful, he's kind of just a shit king. Like, overall, like, he's not even, like, a bad... This is what makes it so interesting. He's not even really a bad king, because under his reign, there's really nothing... There's no trouble. There's no big, huge conflict going on. There's no big wars. But he's also just not doing a lot to cement himself as a good king, which is something he also struggles with in the show and talks about with his trusted people. And it's like, yeah, he's kind of not wrong. He doesn't really do anything. He's like a filler arc in Naruto. He's just kind of there, and under his reign, things are good for most people around him, but he's always trying to make things better, and in this pursuit to make things better, he usually fails, and chooses, maybe not incorrectly, but chooses something that doesn't further anything, but he's always just trying to be nice. I don't know if I'm doing his character justice and explaining him. It's hard to do without getting into spoilers, but he's done some fucked up shit, but every time he's on screen, or every speech he gives, or everything and decision he makes, it seems like he's trying to do it from a place of love for his family and the people adjacent to his family and kingdom. So I don't know, I just found that character to be something of a standout, and the actor portraying him did a really great job of walking that line of like a nice guy, like just a decent man in a ruthless time, I suppose. But yeah, I just thought that was a cool character. And Daemon as well. I think Daemon is the other side of King Viserys. It's his brother. And I think Daemon is another extremely interesting character because you're never quite sure where exactly his head's at and what he's trying to do and accomplish for himself. So I don't know. I just really did enjoy the season overall, even though there were times I felt it to be quite lackluster. And I chalk a lot of that up to the time jumping and having to like restart learning about characters and their positions from episode to episode. Even though it wasn't that big of a deal, you did still have to spend like an additional 15-20 minutes getting reacquainted with what's going on now since so much time's passed, and that was a bit of a headache. So not perfect by any means, but I did think they did a good job and a lot better than I was expecting. It makes me excited for season 2. So, plugging House of the Dragon into the Moistcr, I'm going to give it a nice clean 80%, and I'm really optimistic for season 2 of this. According to HBO, from what I've read, don't know if this is a real report, so take it with a grain of salt, this was their slowest season they'll ever do because it's all about setting up the future and where it goes from here, which is, based on how this wrapped up, it's going to be fucking all-out chaos. So I'm excited to see how they tackle that, and yeah, that's about it. See ya.